Hey, Karen, I need you to settle a little something for me. If I call myself a communications generalist on my website right now, am I costing myself money?
Well, Michelle, I would say not am I. Yeah, you already are. And today we're talking about why I do everything is quietly becoming the most expensive sentence in PR. Welcome back to That Solo Life, the podcast for independent PR and communication pros who are building a business, not just freelancing between contracts. I'm Karen Swim, president of Solo PR Pro.
And I'm Michelle Kane, principal of Voice Matters. And today it's just the two of us, no guest, because this is a topic we've wanted to sit in on for a while.
Yeah, we're calling this the specialization economy. The short version that there's data across the freelance and independent consulting world in 2026. And it's all saying the same thing from about six different directions.
Mm.
Generalists are getting squeezed and specialists are pulling away. So we want to talk about what that means if you are a solo PR pro and not just a freelance designer or a fractional CFO.
Right, right. Because most of the trend pieces about this are written, for freelancers on a broad level. No one's really honed it and translated it for comms people. So that's our job today.
Yeah, that's so true, Michelle. So one quick note before we dig in. Some of today's numbers come from freelance economy trend reports, and a few are still working through our verification process. So we'll flag those as we go
Yeah.
um, because we take that seriously on this show. And as always, we will always have sourcing notes in our show notes of where we get any numbers that we cite or where we're pulling data from.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. What do you got, Karen?
So let's start with the number that kind of made me sit up.
Mm,
The average US freelancer in 2026 is earning somewhere in the high 40s per hour. That sounds
mhm.
fine, except that average is hiding a canyon. Generalist content and writing work on the low end, specialists in high demand niches like us,
Mhm.
billing well over $100 an hour on the high end. So almost nobody is actually earning the average.
Yeah, so it's really like a bimodal distribution, not a nice old bell curve.
Exactly. And
Uh,
this isn't just a freelance platform phenomena. It's showing up across independent consulting generally. So the
mm.
floor is dropping for generalized skills and the ceiling is rising for specialized ones. So the middle, the I'm pretty good at a lot of things middle, is where people get stuck.
Yeah, which that's an uncomfortable thing to come to terms with if you're the person, you've spent your whole career, and I think that's a lot of us, right? Who are like, well, yeah, I could do the media pitch, I can do the crisis plan, I can do your content calendar, roll out your newsletter, all the things that people might be expecting.
I mean, it's uncomfortable because most of us went independent specifically because we're versatile. That's the pitch that we make to ourselves. I can do it all. That's my value. The market, however, is increasingly saying versatility is table stakes, not a differentiator.
Interesting. So what exactly is the differentiator?
Depth in
Hmm.
one specific area for one specific kind of client. So here's the part that should get people's attention. The reasoning is practical, not philosophical. A generalist PR consultant competes with an enormous pool of other generalist PR consultants. Someone who specifically handles crisis communications for mid-sized healthcare systems is competing with a much smaller,
Mm.
more identifiable group. Smaller pool, higher rates, and the client doesn't have to explain their industry to you from scratch, which is worth money on its own.
Wow, yeah, that's so true. I mean, I love that you made that last point. It's so underrated. When we already know a client's world, The first call isn't, a crash course in what we do. We're 2 sentences in and we're already talking strategy. That just saves so much time and pain.
Right. And there's a related shift that's kind of worth flagging. Companies are increasingly asking for proof of impact
Mm.
before they'll hire an independent specialist. Not portfolios, metrics, what happened after you did the work. That's so much easier to produce when you've done the same kind of work for the same kind of client over and over again. Instead of a portfolio that's one tech launch, one restaurant opening, and one nonprofit gala.
So true. Yeah, I've done a little bit of everything it adds up, but it doesn't compound in the same way of saying, "Yeah, I banged this out, I've done this 15 times and we've had this success rate with it, within your industry, so let's go."
Yeah. So let's get concrete because
Mhm.
niche down gets thrown around at every conference and nobody explains what it means practically for a PR consultant.
Right, exactly, because I think a lot of our listeners hear niche and think industry, like I do PR for restaurants, full stop, and I gotta say, that alone makes me nervous because we all know that industries have highs and lows, and you don't want yeah, you know where we're going with this.
Yeah. That's part of it, but saying that,
Yeah,
right, it's incomplete.
yeah,
So the framework that kind of keeps showing up in the broader freelance research is pick a vertical and a horizontal, and your niche is the intersection. So, vertical is the industry,
love it.
healthcare, legal, fintech, sustainability, professional services. But horizontal is the skill or service. So, media relations, crisis and issues management, thought leadership, internal comms, funding round communications.
Love it. So it's not, what do you do? I do PR. It's more I help companies develop thought leadership, in the fintech founder sphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I do crisis communications for law firms.
Right.
That's essentially Sharon Torick's, you know,
Yeah.
it's a throwback to the episode with her. So
Yeah.
she
It's her
does
whole
IP
thing.
and marketing law for independent agencies. She didn't build that as a generalist attorney who dabbles in marketing law.
Very true. Or even think about Cara Ryan, who we've had on recently, she came up through healthcare comms specifically. So now she's got an advisor led AI powered practice on top of that. So it's that vertical and the horizontal both dialed in. So, if you're listening, this is possible. Doesn't sound it's not quite the heavy lift that it sounds like, and it's really something worth considering.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to either of those conversations, we'll link it in the show notes because
Mm.
those are good ones they're good episodes all on their own with the content, but it's a good companion piece to think through what we're talking about today.
Yeah, it definitely is. And once you say a niche out loud like that, it stops sounding like a limitation, right? And it starts sounding like a positioning statement. I do everything isn't memorable, and let's face it, even just saying those specific words is kind of a weak statement because we've always said you can't be good at everything, right? And nobody who refers to their business as I do everything. So they refer business to the specific name that pops into their head when someone says, I need someone who understands healthcare compliance and media.
Yeah. And there's a practical, filtering benefit here too.
Yeah,
We don't talk about that enough. We've mentioned it, but when you're specific, the wrong fit inquiries mostly stop coming in. So you
true.
stop getting can you also just quickly help with our internal newsletter request from an industry you don't want to be in?
Yeah, which side note, that goes hand in hand with scope creep, which deserves its own episode one day. But yes, positioning does some of your qualifying for you before the discovery call even happens or if it happens.
Mm, that's
Mhm.
that's so true. Like, let's not waste our time.
Mm-mm.
And here's another piece that a lot of people miss when they're thinking about niching or specialization. Sorry, I can't talk today.
It's all right.
it, it's really not just a rate conversation, right? It's an income stability conversation, because once you're known for one specific thing, you'll stop pitching one-off projects and start getting asked to stay.
That's true. The glorious retainer, not just the one-off project.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
broader freelance data on this points in that same direction. A large majority of hiring managers say they plan to lean more on freelance and fractional talent for ongoing work, not just isolated products. So that shift toward retainers and fractional roles is happening specifically because specialists make it easy to justify an ongoing relationship. Nobody keeps a generalist on retainer. You keep the person who is the healthcare crisis expert or the fintech thought leadership expert on retainer.
Right, right. And honestly, going after this model, that solves the feast or famine cycle that most all of us solo practitioners, complain about or unfortunately experience from time to time. You're not reselling yourself from zero every 90 days.
Yeah, and I think that also changes, the pitch, right? So rather
Mhm.
than I'll get you 3 media placements for $5,000, it becomes I'll manage your ongoing media strategy for, and please don't hang on these numbers. These are
Yeah.
just, 4,000 a month.
Yeah.
And here's what you get every quarter. Please charge way more than
Mhm.
those examples. But that leads to, a really different client relationship, and it's a completely different cash flow picture for you.
Definitely, definitely. And, it's I'm sure in a lot of our cases, it might not be that hard to make happen just because you've already developed relationships with these clients. And, if you've been doing this a few years and you're still living proposal to proposal, this concept is also worth sitting with. Niching is often the thing that makes the retainer conversation possible in the first place.
Mm,
So, moving on, because we always like to look at all sides of things, let's talk about the pushback. Because every
yeah.
time this does come up in our beautiful solo PR pro community, there are some objections.
All right, give them to me.
All right. So, number one, if I niche down, I'll turn away good work and go broke waiting for the right clients.
Yeah, that's real. And I don't want to brush that off. There's a genuine ramp up period, right? So the pattern
Yeah.
in the research is roughly 6 months to a year before a tighter niche pays off. This isn't rebrand Monday, raise your rates Tuesday. It's a runway decision, right? So you don't torch
Yeah.
your generalist client base overnight. You shift the new business conversation while you honor those relationships that you already have in place.
True. It's similar to scaling up your rates. Every new person you bring on, you charge them what you probably should have been charging others. But so, objection number two, my market is too small if I go this specific.
I mean,
It's valid.
so it is, but you can counter that with math, not reassurance.
Mm,
So if there are even a few hundred mid-sized healthcare systems in the country, you only
mm,
need a handful of retained clients to build a full solo practice. Too
yeah,
small almost never turns out to be true once you run the numbers. So we somehow conflate smaller pool of competitors with smaller pool of clients, and those are two very different pools.
that's true. That's true. Small doesn't mean the same thing in every context. True. All right. Objection three. This is the one, that I would think of too, or, that we might have heard the most. I'll get bored doing the same kind of work over and over, but aren't we
I
doing that
mean,
anyway?
so I think that actually flips the other way for most people. So
Yeah.
as a generalist, every new client is a cold start, right? New industry, new
Yeah.
vocabulary, new stakeholders you don't understand yet. That can be exhausting in its own way. But when you specialize, the work still varies, but
Yeah.
you're not relearning an entire industry every engagement or reacquainting yourself. with every engagement. So the energy goes into strategy instead of orientation.
That's true. That's true. And, I can say I can feel that shift myself with voice and tone work. Once you stop trying to be a generalist brand consultant and you get specific about voice, the work gets more interesting, not less, because you can go deeper instead of wider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fourth one, which I think is the quiet one nobody says out loud. What if I pick the wrong niche?
Yeah. That's a real fear.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And I think the honest answer is a niche isn't a tattoo. It's a hypothesis that you're testing with real market feedback.
Yeah.
You commit for a focused stretch and the budget and the referrals genuinely aren't there, you adjust.
Yeah.
That's not failure, that's data. What
Yeah.
doesn't work is never committing long enough to get a real signal either way.
True. True.
So let's give people something to actually do with this because go niche without a method is just anxiety.
Homework without instructions. Awful word problems. Ah.
Right. Right. So here's a simple three-question filter. So question one, where do you already have unfair advantage?
Hmm.
Past industry experience, a network, credentials, lived experience, something that means you start ahead of a stranger walking in cold.
Right. Right. Filter question two. Where's the budget? This is the one a lot of people skip. You can be brilliant in a niche that simply doesn't spend on PR. Well, that's not going to help. So you want to make sure you're matching your interest against actual willingness to pay. Healthcare, legal, financial services, B2B tech, they consistently show up as categories with real comms budgets. So, no matter what niche you're considering, definitely keep that in mind.
That that's powerful right there. I
Yeah.
think people really need to sit with that and remember that because you're right. There could be, industries that are super specialized and it's your jam, but they don't have comms budgets.
Hmm.
So then why focus on it?
Right.
Third question, and this is one that's easy to forget. Can you say it in one sentence? And does that sentence make a stranger go, "Oh, I know exactly who needs you"? If
Mm.
your answer requires 3 qualifying clauses, it's not sharp enough yet.
All right. So let's run a little drill on this, right? Let's do a hypothetical. Say a listener spent 6 years in house, 6 years in house at a regional bank before going solo, and now does a little bit of everything for small business clients.
Yeah. So question 1, unfair advantage, right?
Hmm.
That person already speaks fluent financial services, compliance, and regulator relationships.
Right.
That is powerful. Most PR consultants would need a year to learn that vocabulary.
Right. So okay, so they've already got the lingo down. They know the world. Question 2, budget. Like we said a couple of beats ago, financial services and fintech are consistently well-funded categories for communications. So, good sign.
Yeah. And then question 3, the one sentence test. I help community banks and credit unions navigate media and regulatory communications. Say that at a conference and watch how fast someone says, "Oh, I know someone who needs that."
Yeah. And, that's the whole exercise, which thank goodness. It's 3 questions. You might spend 15 minutes, of honest thinking, and you can go from I do a bit of everything to a sentence that can actually generate some referrals to rewarding and well-paying work.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually add a fourth question to this
Okay.
too. So, and it's unofficial.
Mhm.
Are you willing to hold the line publicly? So
Mm.
you don't have to, you don't have to refuse every off niche referral that lands in your inbox, but your website, your LinkedIn, your pitch, those need to stay consistent or the positioning will not do its job.
That's true. That's true. And that is the difference, once you make this decision to go down this road between having a niche and actually benefiting from it, right? A lot of people will write specializing in healthcare comms on their about page, but then their case studies are about restaurants, nonprofits, and all sorts of things. So the market being, your prospects out there, they're not going to believe positioning that that you're not walking your talk. They need to see the evidence of what you claim to be doing.
Yeah.
So, this brings us to something we've touched on earlier. So, once you've picked the niche, how do you actually prove it's working?
Yeah, this is where the
Mhm.
portfolio versus metrics point comes back. So for every engagement going forward in your niche, capture one number:
Mm.
media pickups that led to a specific outcome, a measurable shift in share of voice, signups, attendance, whatever's real for that client. It doesn't have to be dramatic. One sentence, one number, one outcome.
Right. So, and to me, that sounds something like position the founder as a category expert. We got, let's say, 3 inbound press inquiries within a month of the first byline piece running. One line, but it does more work in a pitch than an entire portfolio page. And let's face it, people don't want to read a whole page anyway. They just want
Yeah,
to hear a sentence or two
you're
of how you
right.
can be effective.
Didn't we just like share recently that, people don't want ducks, they want, something different. And so
Mhm.
that it's exactly that kind of line, Michelle. And
Yeah,
you need to collect those before you need them. So don't wait until a prospect asks for proof to go digging through 18 months of, Slack messages to remember what happened. Just have your little running notes document, whether you use Notion, a notepad, or whatever,
yeah.
whatever your jam is for saving stuff, and put it all in one place and have it at the ready.
Yeah, yeah. It really it helps on so many levels to build the habit into your closeout process, right? And every wrapped engagement, one sentence for the case study bank. In future, you will be very happy.
Agreeing. I mean,
Yeah,
I would even say if you're organized enough to do this, I would just do it every quarter.
yeah,
Because you have, campaigns that you're running for clients, take a moment, after every campaign and just capture some metrics and save those because you can use all that stuff. It doesn't have to be the whole entire client engagement. It could be specific campaigns.
yeah. That's true. That's true. And I know I fault do this. You're just so into like okay, moving on that you don't stop and celebrate your little wins and document them so they can help you win even more. All right.
Yeah.
So before we wrap, Karen, tie us back to why this matters beyond just an individual rate card.
Yeah, I would say that, picking an area of specialization means that, yeah, you're going to say no to some revenue in the short term and you're betting on the medium term. And that is scary. And it's a scary call to make in isolation when you don't have anybody to reality check it. So I think it's
Yeah.
a conversation worth having with other independent practitioners who've actually made that leap. That can be so helpful. And then it's not theory, right? It's real. Here's what happened when I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the perfect reason to join soloprpro.com because then you can bring that into our community and we can hash it out and we can talk about it because that's what we do best in there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
exactly that. And I mean, of course, you can always email us too if you want
Yeah.
to run an
True.
idea by us and you want to talk it out with
Yeah.
us. We are available.
We would love that. Yes. So that's it for this episode. If that got you thinking about your own positioning, we'd love to hear where you land. As Karen said, shoot us a note. Um, our show notes and everything good about this will be at thatsololife.com. Drop a comment or let's talk about it in the Solo PR Pro community.
Love that. And if I do everything is still on your website tonight, that's fine. We're not the specialization police, but maybe run the 3-question filter before you write your next proposal.
And I don't know about you, Karen, but I'm talking to myself on that one too. So until next time.
Take care of yourselves out there, Solo PR pros.